our security cameras, showing you what this terrifying raid looked like. But no words can describe what this dehumanizing act felt like. Some had legal papers and were literally snatched from the streets. I saw it with my own eyes. When we handed one agent the official papers of a legal resident, the masked agent took the documents, shoved our handcuffed resident into an unmarked vehicle, and sped off. That helplessness, watching dignity stripped and lives shattered in seconds, is a trauma that no community should endure. And we must ask, is this activity a rehearsal for something darker? Perhaps even martial law. I get it. Some say they shouldn't be here illegally. Others feel frustration that migrants received resources while so many of our own unhoused and unemployed still struggle. I hear that. I understand that. But today, I'm not asking us to debate politics, partisanship, or even the valid tensions that exist. I'm asking us to consider this. What is the role of humanity in moments like this? As a faith leader, I choose to anchor myself with what Micah chapter 6 verse 8 declares. He has shown you, O mortal, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? To act justly and to love mercy and to walk humbly with your God. This is not about political sides. This is about moral responsibility.
And good evening with that. Welcome to the Samuel Wood Proctor Critical Conversation that we're having this evening. We're talking about how to resist with everything that's going on. I don't know about you, but even watching the little bit of footage we had of what happened in Chicago a couple of weeks ago does something to my very spirit. But good evening again. I'm Reverend Dr. Susan Smith, Director of the Office of Clergy and Leadership Resource Development for the Samuel Wood Proctor Conference. And my partner in crime has gone his way. Reverend Marcus Tabb will be here shortly. But we're here to talk about what's going on and how we need to resist. The rights of us as Black people and brown people are being encroached upon and taken away bit by bit by bit. And I, for one, don't know that these people who call themselves ICE agents are really ICE agents. I have some ideas. I'm not going to say all that, but what's happening to our people is it's disturbing, it's inhumane, it's all kinds of things. And I think that we need to talk about what's going on, how it makes us feel, and what we can do to resist it. So we have four guests. They're going to help us in this whole conversation. We have Reverend Ciera Bates-Chamberlain of LIVEFREE, Illinois. Father Michael Pfleger, the pastor of the faith community of St. Sabina, but I think she's like the pastor of the churches of the whole country. I'm just saying. The Reverend Dr. Cassandra Gould, an organizer who I think is one of the best organizers in the country, who works with Faith in Action in Washington, D.C. And Dr. Kellie Carter Jackson, the Michael and Denise Kellen 1968 Associate Professor and Chair of Africana Studies at Wellesley College, and the author of several books. Her latest one, We Refuse, A Forceful History of Black Resistance, she's going to refer to as we get into this conversation tonight. And let me say up front that I think it is a book that everybody should read. And so we're going to start by opening with Father Pfleger and Reverend Ciera. And Reverend Marcus, when he gets in, can you share your personal observations about what is happening in Chicago? You know, what happened for sure, but what is still happening in Chicago and how people are reacting and resisting?
Okay, I'll be glad to start. First of all, Reverend Ciera and I went over to the South Shore apartment building where the ICE and the border agents came and stormed the building at 2 o'clock in the morning. We heard the horrible results of what people felt. To hear Black Hawk helicopters over their building. Windows were shot out by the ICE agents from the outside in, while people were sleeping and children were sleeping and families were sleeping. Doors were knocked down. I went over there a second day when a man told me that he had a gun, he'd have killed the ICE agents. Because he said, I woke up with somebody breaking in the door of my apartment. I had no idea. They were all masked, all dressed in black. I had no idea who they were. He said, but I couldn't find my gun. Um, People were all taken out of the building and out into the street, half dressed and clothes and underwear at 2 o'clock in the morning. Nobody was ever given a court order, was shown anything. It was one purpose, intimidation, to threaten, to militarize, and make a very, very clear message. And if this was a building primarily of African Americans, while there were immigrants also there, but it was to send a very, very important, I think, a message that they want to send in Chicago all over, that Black and brown people are disposable, and they get an absolutely zero respect. They are treated as objects. We had an alderman here thrown around like a rag doll and handcuffed. It is to intimidate, is to put people in fear and to control people. It is occupation, and there has been ICE agents in my community here in Auburn Gresham 4 times in the last week. So yeah, what we saw was horrifying, and the trauma that was left, and the school kids across the street who had to come to school the next morning and see what had happened to this building, were also had to be traumatized for it. Dr. Ciera?
So I would add to that one, we know this isn't about immigration or violence reduction, that this is absolutely about Trump pushing, or this administration pushing another agenda. And in order to further their agenda, they need to occupy spaces and places that are resisting what they're doing. And in addition to what Father Pfleger said, we're also seeing a lot of citizens being detained. We've seen several Black people beaten, detained. There was this morning, we have a Faith Over Fear coalition, which is a multi-faith coalition organizing and resisting against the deportations, as well as the National Guard. And one of our steering committee members had one of his members, who is a U.S. citizen, detained. So it is very chaotic and concerning, because just naming what Father Pfleger saying about the mass that we're seeing, these agents have one. You don't know if it's ICE, federal agents, vigilantes, or just some creep who decided to use this moment to pick someone off the streets. So people are very fearful of what this means, and even just trying to figure out how long will this last. So our folks are concerned, but we are fighting back.
Okay, and we're going to get to that. Thank you for that. And I'm really interested in hearing you, as probably the youngest person in this group, to talk about it, because oftentimes we just gloss over what young people are doing and saying and thinking and feeling, but I think it's very important, your perspective. Reverend Tab, you live in that area. Tell me what you have experienced since then, or on that night, or on that day, and since then in your community.
So my church is within a mile of that building, and out there with Reverend Ciera and Father Mike, I've talked to an actual senior citizen who was in the building. I'm concerned about how that impacted them. And what she told me was, well, Pastor, they didn't knock at our door. Me and my friends, they didn't knock. That Ciera was out there talking with her as well. She said, they knocked down the door, kicked down the doors, and emptied the apartments of residents, Black residents, who were complaining about the conditions of the building. And so those were the Black folks who were taken out and detained and came back to not having an apartment that was a livable condition. And so, and within my community, at my church, I have senior Belizeans who are coming to me and saying, Pastor, I'm scared. I'm scared that I have to carry around my papers. Women in there 75 and older, who are afraid that what might happen to them or what they're seeing on the news might happen to them. So that's, in the community of the seniors that I serve, they're afraid as well. So.
For good reason.
Can I add in, Reverend Susan, just one of my members was detained last week, him and his wife and his 3 children. They were asked for their pull over in their car. They were asked for their identification, car identification, insurance, and all that. And then were asked, do you have proof that these 3 children are your children? Now, who the hell carries around proof of your children? They were held for over an hour and then told to go back on their way, would never given any names, identification, or nothing.
So none of this is legal, right? None of this is
No.
legal. None of it is legal. We know it's immoral, but it's definitely not legal. It is a tool being used to create fear and intimidate people, hopefully so people won't want to come out in the streets and vote. I think it's all related to the upcoming midterms, and the desire of, some to have an authoritarian government. But what we're concerned about now is that people are hurting, and we as Black people have faced intimidation for a long time. As I'm getting ready to go over to Dr. Carter Jackson, if you are listening and you have questions, please put them in the Q&A part of the chat of the thing, and we will get to it, and people will help me because I'm real poor at getting to that stuff, those questions. Okay, but Dr. Kellie Carter Jackson, none of this is surprising to you. You're listening to this. None of this is surprising to you as a professor and a writer. Share why.
I mean, some of it is still shocking to hear, or I'll say upsetting to hear, because we know throughout history that we have actually seen elements of this before. The first book that I wrote was on the abolitionist movement, and I have like a whole chapter on the fugitive slave law. And this is exactly what they were doing to Black Northerners, some who were fugitives, some who were actually free Black Northerners, but they were kidnapping them, they were sweeping them up, they were dragging them out of their places of work, dragging them out of their homes, and then, putting them back into slavery, or sometimes people who had never been enslaved, still selling them, kidnapping them and selling them into slavery. And so when I think about like how history repeats itself, how you have these brazen men who will terrorize communities with no due process. I mean, there is absolutely no due process. There is no, validity or sort of organization in which someone has to have a warrant or prove their identity or show that they're actually officially ICE. I was thinking about what Ciera said earlier about how this is also an opportunity where someone could easily pose as ICE to also engage in nefarious behavior. These are scary times. And I wrote We Refuse, not knowing that this moment was coming, but being deeply frustrated with the options before us that we had to resist. And one of the things that I will say that the Trump administration has executed with like evil brilliance is this idea that it is multiple plates spinning. It's chaos everywhere. It's chaos in the classroom. It's chaos in the community. It is chaos everywhere. And that feeling of like not knowing where to put out the fire first is intentional, so that people will feel helpless, so that people will feel as though there's nothing they can do to sort of stop what is in front of them. And what my book does is it pushes back on this idea that we only have 2 options. And historically, those options have always been either violence or nonviolence, that people can sort of either throw a bomb, throw a Molotov cocktail, or they can protest, and that's it. And those options don't feel very sufficient. I don't know if you like me, those options don't feel like good choices. They don't feel like choices that accomplish much. And so I wanted to think, how do we move outside of the box? How do we get creative? How do we think of alternative ways to refuse that is not limited to this like false dichotomy of either violence or nonviolence? And so each chapter looks at revolution, it looks at protection, it looks at force, I look at flight, I look at joy. And it's not an exhaustive list, but it's a way of getting people to think like, no, we absolutely have tools in front of us that we can employ to sort of mitigate harm and to try to sort of stop harm altogether. There are ways we can be a good neighbor. What does that look like in this moment? And it's also a way of trying to get other people to think with me and be in conversation with me about, like, what are you doing in your community? What have you seen that has worked? I live in, the suburbs of Boston, but we have a large immigrant community, especially of Brazilian heritage or ancestry. And so the town next to me has been like flooded with ice. And one of the things that the community is doing is like, ice watch, patrolling the block, helping parents of children of immigrants get their children to school, doing pickup, doing drop off, doing like sort of not DoorDash, but DoorDash deliveries for people who don't want to leave their home, for people who are afraid to sort of leave their home, saying, hey, do you want someone to walk you to your doctor's appointment? You want somebody to walk you here to wherever, you need to go. Like, there are all of these wonderful ways that we can be a protective force in our neighborhood. And I've actually seen how a lot of that has been really effective in stopping some of ICE's efforts. Like, you've seen probably some of the video virals that have gone on where the community has either gathered around and there's so many cell phones and there's so many people watching, and that creates its own chaos where ICE sort of relinquishes because they don't want that smoke. But like, it takes strength in numbers, and it takes all of us coming together to really combat this system. We cannot do it on our own, which is why the book is not titled I Refuse, but we refuse, because this work has to be collective.
Absolutely. So we do have power. That's one of the things that I got from your book, that we do have power. And I think one of the goals of the people and their antics is to make us feel like we don't have power, but we do have power. Father Pfleger and Reverend Ciera and Reverend Marcus, what types of resistance have you seen since that happened in Chicago? What kind of resistance have you seen people doing? You're muted, Dr. Father. There you go.
Go ahead, Ciera.
Okay. So I mentioned earlier the Faith Fear Coalition. Once everything started popping off, including
Reverend Ciera, you're going in and out. You're going in and out.
Okay. I'm gonna turn out for a second. So once we received threats of the National Guard coming in, including ICE, we immediately assembled a multi-faith coalition.
Reverend Ciera, you're still going in and out. You may have to reconnect. Let's go to Father Pfleger and then reconnect, and we'll come back. Father Pfleger, what types of resistance have you seen?
Well, first of all, we've done several evenings and daytime workshops on training, telling people what to do, how to respond, video everything, carry identification with, doing just what Dr. Kellie Jackson just said, is getting surrounding people when they come out. Don't walk away from it, stand there, be visible, let people know we're not going to accept this, we don't tolerate it. I think it's the church is in an extremely important time now of speaking about their pulpits every Sunday. This is a time for the church to be the lead in this and not in the background and not praying about it, but getting up and doing something about it. Telling people not to become overwhelmed, not to become depressed or silent. This is not the time to tune out. This is the time to turn up. This is the time to tune in, and this is time to get active. Don't fall into the old traps of, we don't talk about politics and religion. That's all we should be talking about right now. At every place we go, I tell our congregations here, at home, with your family, in your neighborhood, at the store, at job, and the church hall, at the ATM machine, every place you go, speak about what's going on. Create this conversation, this narrative of fighting back, of resisting, of exposing it, of condemning it, of organizing, of saying what was just said. What are you doing in your house, in your block, in your neighborhood, in your church? What are you doing? And participating in rallies, calling senators, calling congressmen, being aggressive. This is a time to step up like never before. One last thing on that is that, and I was talking about this yesterday, with all this upheaval and all this shifting that's going on right now, I think this is as horrible as it all is. It is an amazing opportunity for the faith communities to say we're not going to bend back. Now, let's now just go and jump on the Democrat bandwagon because they're better than the Republican. This is a time to say, to hell with both. Let's put out our own agenda. What does the kingdom of God look like? What does the kingdom of God demand? We need our own Project 2025, 2026 at the Faith Committee. This is the time for us to step up and be the loudest voice out there or become irrelevant.
That's right. That's right. Reverend Ciera, are you connected now better?
I can see if y'all can y'all hear me better
Yes,
now?
better.
Okay, cool beans. So I want to say that first the resistance started before the National Guard and ICE hit Chicago. Because this stemmed from Project 2025. I can recall, I'm pretty sure many of you know Pastor Michael McBride sort of predicted that this would happen if this administration was to get elected. And there was a map that was put out. But we began resisting once we saw the Project 2025 agenda being played out through the various executive orders, and that looked like trainings and educating people on Project 2025. That went, the next step from there was when the big bad bill was prior to it being passed. We were educating people about it and trying to resist in that moment to push back against the passage of that. And so when we approached the situation with the occupation, we begin to educate people about that as well, so that we can show that this is not an isolated incident, but this is a part of a bigger narrative. And so training has continued. We've trained multiple people in faith communities on Know Your Rights. Other organizations and tables that we're a part of have been training people on rapid response teams. Organizations are partnering on mutual aid services. We know that the faith community can step up, because not only are we fighting back and putting our bodies on the line for our loved ones, that brothers and sisters that are impacted by ICE, but we know with the other federal cuts that are coming, we have to equip and prepare our communities. So our faith communities are stepping up and forming coalitions so that we can have a multi-pronged approach that's organized and that we're collaborating as much as possible.
Okay, that's good. Necessary. So training is a big part of the resistance. Dr. Carter Jackson, in your book, I love this part. You talked about the role of Black women historically in resisting. Can you talk a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, sure. The whole book is really centered around the contributions of Black women. And I wanted to be intentional about this because I think that when we think about resistance and refusal, we have kind of gendered it as masculine, that we have that iconic photo of, like, you know, Malcolm X with the gun, or we think of like the Black Panther Party, or we think of like, you know, Frederick Douglass, and we erase the women that have been present and that have been doing a lot of the heavy lifting. And so one of the reasons I wrote this book is because I really wanted to sort of give those women voice and volume and value, and say, like, no, Black women have been at the forefront of these fights, not just the forefront, but they've also been like the masterminds, the ones that are thinking about the strategy and how we implement it and how we employ it and how we sort of build coalitions. And so each chapter really focuses on another woman's either contributions, her struggle, her fight, her activism, from the Haitian Revolution all the way up until, you know, last year. So I'm constantly looking at that, because I really do see women as sort of at the bottom of the totem pole when we think about what freedom and liberation look like. To be Black, to be a woman, is to be in a very precarious position. And I think about this sort of double tax when I think about, you know, our immigrant brothers and sisters, that when they have these multiple identities and all of them are being targeted, how do we sort of think about what they want and what they need, and maybe how they move, and maybe we should take instruction from that. So I think that Black women's contributions have just been invaluable.
And I think that's important for the women here listening. It's important to hear because we have such a role. We have historically had such a role in fighting and resisting the stuff. Would you share just a bit about the Christiana Revolution?
Oh yeah. So the Christiana resistance takes place in 1851, and to give a little background, it takes place in Pennsylvania, which is in a free state, and it borders Maryland, which is a slave state. And so a lot of escaped slaves from the state of Maryland would run away. Like Frederick Douglass is from Maryland, you know, Harriet Tubman is from Maryland. And if they could get to Pennsylvania, they could sort of live in freedom. And so this one Black community, Christiana, said, you know what, we are going to be here on the border. We're going to be on the front lines, and we are going to serve as our own protective community for anybody that comes to us. They start their own, called the Lancaster Black Self-Protection Society. Their motto is even at the risk of our own lives, which is quite a motto to have. And they maintain that they will be the vanguard, that anyone who comes to them, they will help to get to Canada or help to get to freedom or give provisions or whatever they need, supplies to get further north. And in one particular incident, these 4 men escaped slavery in Maryland. They come to William and Eliza Parker's house, and William and Eliza Parker are sort of the head of the Black Lancaster Protection Society. And they knock on their door, and William Parker's like, sure, you know, I will help you out. He sends the men up to his attic. And because William and Eliza Parker had this reputation for protecting fugitive slaves, slave catchers and the slave owners knew exactly where to go when their property ran away. And so they go to the Parker's home, and Edward Gorsuch, who owns these 4 men who have run away, he brings along his son, his nephew, a U.S. Marshal, and they're banging on the Parker's door, and they're basically saying like, hey, we know you have our slaves. We know you have our property. We want them. We want them back right now. And William Parker comes to the door and it's basically like, over my dead body. Like, that's not like, that's not happening. I'm not giving them up. And his wife, Eliza, what I love about her is she's like, babe, do you want me to sound the alarm? I will sound the alarm. Like, because they had a whole plan in place if something like this happened. And it's interesting because her brother-in-law is also in the house, and her brother-in-law gets scared. And he's like, you know what? We should just give them up. We should just let them go. And Eliza picks up a corn cutter. And this says this corn cutter, which is like a machete, is not just for slave catchers, it's also for cowards. Like, I will chop off the head of anyone who tries to give these men up. Like, they were that committed to maintaining Black freedom and liberation. And so Eliza goes up to the roof of her house. She starts to blow a horn to sound the alarm. Within minutes, 80 men and women, white and Black, some Quakers are there. They show up with farm equipment. They show up with guns, pistols, rifles. They surround the house. And Edward Gorsuch, his nephew, his son, the U.S. Marshal, they are panicking because they are clearly outnumbered. And the U.S. Marshal takes off. He's like, oh, I know a fair fight when I see one. And he takes off running. Edward Gorsuch is like, no, I'm not leaving without my property. And there's a standoff. And long story short, at the end of the altercation, Edward Gorsuch gets shot. He gets beat up by his own enslaved property. He lays on the ground dying. And William Parker writes about this in his narrative. He says, and the women put it into him. The women put it into him. Like, Edward Gorsuch lay on the ground dying, and the women put it into him. And it is just a remarkable story of how this community stood up for these 4 fugitive men, and they escape. They go all the way to Rochester, New York. Frederick Douglass gives them shelter. He feeds them, and then helps them get on a boat to Toronto, Canada. There's a case, but everyone is acquitted. It's all dismissed. I mean, the charges are essentially dropped because they can't prove sort of who shot or who was the one that was responsible for the death of Edward Gorsuch. But it's the first time in which, one, you have massive resistance to the state. 2, you have a dead slaveholder at the end of the altercation, and no one is held responsible for his death. I mean, it is national news, and it really galvanizes the abolitionist movement into believing that there's more than they can do than just sort of say that slavery is wrong. They can actually fight against it.
See, that's an important story, and I'm going to come to you, Reverend Dr. Cassandra, because that's one of the things that we're fighting, I think. And thank you for sharing that story, Dr. Kellie. But that's one of the things we're finding. People are saying there's nothing we can do. That's an issue. And also it's an important story because it shows that we, the women, have a role in this. We have always had a role in this, and it's something that we should lift up and use to our benefit. So can you talk a little bit about what you have been doing in terms of getting people to understand the need for resistance and what kind of resistance you've been teaching?
Yeah, thank you. And so good to always good to be with Proctor, and particularly with these esteemed panelists. I really want to say to Chicago, I think that this regime thought that you all would be the canary in the coal mine, but you've been a canary in the coal mine in a reverse fashion, basically by reminding us and demonstrating so that people have visible images of the violence of the state juxtaposed to the power of organized people. And so we are even using Chicago as a model to remind people of, particularly around the kind of non-cooperation that is possible when the mayor brought the salt trucks out. That is the kind of visible, organized non-cooperation that will actually get us through this. We know that we're living in this era where the fraudulent king has no clothes, but is still demanding our obedience. I agree with Father Pfleger. This moment, while it is full of righteous indignation and horrors, vile and violent realities that we've seen all over this country, from LA to in front of my house in DC, New Jersey, and so many other places. We know that, particularly in the Black prophetic tradition, silence has never been an option for us. And so, in this moment, we're trying coalescing people around the kind of organizing that has really always been what we've had to do. Political scientists continue to talk about backsliding democracy. Well, it hasn't backslid. Hell, it's never been here. And that is something that we have been trying to organize and fill in the gap. I'm so glad that you brought up the sisters. You all are in the home of Ida B. Wells, as well as Eva Lewis, one of the youngest organizers of Black Lives Matter, of Pastor Ciera Bates-Chamberlain. And so we know what to do in this moment. The things that we've been organizing around at Faith in Action, and if you don't know us, we are formerly PICO, the 53, almost 54 years old, and the country's largest faith-led grassroots organizing entity. We've been really trying to help people to understand non-compliance. Authoritarianism depends on our silence, our exhaustion, and our despair. And so we actually have to make sure that we are opening up our mouths and having an audible and a visible resistance. I see Anna Garcia Ashley on here, the executive director of the Gamaliel organization, and collectively with Gamaliel and other faith-led orgs, we've been bridging the gap, really. So it is a time that we have to be so sober and so serious that we have to put down all of our petty differences that we know that we sometimes have. We have to cross those boundaries that white supremacy has basically boxed us into. Organizing historically has been very territorial. And so we've been debunking that by actually organizing together, getting different organizations, different people from across faith traditions and etc., and reminding movement writ large, particularly these left liberal so-called spaces, reminding them writ large that faith has always led movement. And in this particular moment, it matters most because white Christian nationalism is the religious organizing arm of authoritarianism. And so we have a responsibility to actually take our stuff back in simplest terms, right? We have to contest for the narrative. And so when we talk about what people can do in this moment, we cannot allow that fraudulent notion of Christianity to have the last word. So it means we have to reclaim the language of morality and faith from them. People have to see us, not just us posting about the visual that we had, but actually coming outside, taking over public space with the kind of visible above ground resistance that will remind people, Dr. Sue, you said, I don't want people to leave this space hopeless. Some of those who are barely holding on because they're wondering, where are we? They see the No Kings marchers and etc. But people are looking for on-ramps to engage in the kind of ongoing organizing that is more than showing up at a rally, but actually centers their humanity and helps them to build something that will outlast even this current regime. Some of the things that, in very practical terms, that you can do. This work is really engaging in disruption, and so this coalescing of organizing entities is also about a disruption as business of business as usual. We don't need allies in this moment because allies are fragile. Dr. King says, and where do we go from here? Using the language of 1968, he said, in the aftermath of the Voting Rights Act and etc., when the Negro looked around, all of the allies had quietly left. The pulpit had failed. The media had failed, and so we don't need allies. We need people who are in a committed, sacred kind of a covenant with us because of our humanity. And so we have to actually engage in that disrupts this kind of notion of, if that's not my fight, I'm not going to show up. I was stood on the steps of the Supreme Court last week, hours before the hearing. And when I looked around, most of the people looked like me. And that's fine. But if voting rights go away, it is a sign that these barely free elections that we have are going to be potentially on the auction block, and that's going to be an everybody's problem. And so we have to have the kind of commitment to each other's shared humanity, which means we also have to disrupt the anti-Blackness that also runs rampant even in some movement spaces. We have to be able to defend people. So the kind of that you all are doing in Chicago, going where the people are, where people are being snatched and etc. We have been in the streets. I use my voice on behalf of Faith in Action, in the streets in Los Angeles because ICE troops were there. In the streets of Washington, D.C., in Basile, Louisiana, where they have been snatching people and holding them illegally. So people actually need to see that we are with them, that we are actually doing the kind of education that LIVEFREE is doing, that Pastor Ciera talked about, the kind of civic education, because some people don't actually know what's going on. Civics has been taken out of schools and etc. And it's so much information. The velocity of it is literally overwhelming. And so we actually have to teach people. And then we have to ask ourselves, the regime has built their own red lines, being the kinds of things that they can do. If we get away with that, if we get away with troops in the street in Chicago, if we get away with troops in the street in DC, if we continue to snatch innocent people and no one says anything, all it does is consolidate power on their side. And so we got to wrestle for that power, friends. We got to actually be willing to put more on the line and to do like what faith leaders have been doing in Chicago. And then we have to delegitimize this regime, delegitimize the myths around the fraudulent notion of a hierarchy of humanity that says some of God's children are more deserving or more favored than other children. We have to actually be able to teach and to preach, to do the kind of teach-ins and etc. Use our microphones, whether they're inside on Zoom or in the public square, to actually share and expose authoritarianism for what it is, and be able to demonstrate for people a moral vision of who God is calling us to be and what God requires of us in this moment. And then the last thing I'm going to say is this way in which we can invite folk in. There are people at home, possibly some even on the Zoom, are like, what and where can I tap in? It's why 7 million people show up in the streets, because they don't, some of them have not been invited into anything else. So it is a thing that they can do. But the kind of things we've been talking about on this call, what is the opportunity for those who already naturally do mutual aid? With SNAP benefits not being available in the month of November. What are the opportunities to build the kind of mutual aid, the pastoral and trauma care networks that will be life-giving that people need? And also, what is our opportunity to build the kind of coalitions that people have choices? They can make their own choice to choose conscious over compliance, right? That they can say that this is something that is moral, that is so immoral that I cannot sit this out. What might we be inviting them into? What is the organizing meeting? What is the kind of teach-in? What are the calls that they can make around things that are happening in their own community? What's the opportunity that we have right now to also organize elected officials so that when it comes to their Black streets, because it's coming to all of the Black streets in America, y'all, that folk can take clues and say, you know what, we will not be compliant and shuck and jive and dance for master, but we will pull out our salt trucks or whatever we can do as well. So those are just a few things.
And you can tell Dr. Gould is on fire because so much. So, amen. There was a question I wanted, and anybody can answer it. Somebody asked, is like the Underground Railroad, are there resources being compiled for the displaced, traumatized, and vulnerable that can be shared across communities? Anybody can answer that.
Yes,
Anybody
there
in that room?
absolutely are
Okay.
there are some resources, and I will follow up with Proctor around a set. Of course, there's all the toolkits in the world, right? Around how we disrupt and defend and deflect. But some of these resources to help our vulnerable people really actually has to happen.
Okay, let me ask you this. Do you find in anybody can answer this, in the work of trying to and the work that you're doing in this period of time, are people resistant to learning about resistance? Do you find
I'm gonna jump in. We just held it was kind of a hush harbor meeting, but it's over now. We trained 1,000
oh,
people, 1,000 in-person people for 3 days. Anna Garcia Ashley with not is on here, knows that as well. With over 30 coalitions, 30 networks and organizations, right? People are hungry.
okay,
People are waiting for people like us to tell them how to do
okay,
and what can they do. And so we are the scientists say, you get these 3.5% folk, but it's in, and I hate for people to actually repeat that because it just seems like, oh, let's just go count people. But we're in a peak time that we might actually be able to disrupt and turn this thing around. And so you train 250, I train 500, you train 1,000, and we connect these coalitions so that we don't have the kind of fractures that we've had in the past. And we don't have to agree on all of the things, friends, all the theological things and all of that. That's how we got that's not all, that's not the only way we got here, but that's how some of our fractures were created. But if we can agree on our own humanity, on shared humanity, and that we all have a right to live and to thrive, we will actually be able to defend ourselves.
And that's good to know, because one of the ways that one of the banes of our existence in this country is Black people not liking Black people, not liking ourselves, not wanting to fight against the people who mean us no good. And so I was wondering if you are finding that type of resistance. Father Pfleger, Reverend Ciera, are you finding any type of pushback from in your communities from people? Or are they just saying, just leave it alone?
I think Reverend Ciera and I heard when we were out there in South Shore. There is certainly one of my concerns is we're falling into the okey doke of what the government has wanted to do for some time, and that is keep us fighting one another over crumbs. There was this great belief, and that's why for the last year I've been telling the governor here, telling the mayor here, stop talking about the immigrants. Talk about the unhoused, whether that's Black or white or brown, whether from Haiti or Peru or Venezuela, no matter where it's from, because there's this tendency to want to turn us against each other. Ciera and I were at that building, as she mentioned, I think, or Dr. Tab did, that this building has been in horrible shape for years. And if one of the men there said, well, they're getting all this money and getting all this free rent. If someone was getting all that money, that is not the building that you would be going to live in. It is a perception that there's all this money being passed out, and to try to create that division. And we have to understand that that's what the hidden hand always does. That's what the power always does. The oligarchs always do. Keep us fighting against each other, so that we are fighting over crumbs while they pull the strings and get away and make all the billions of dollars. We have to unite people. If we do not, as I think Dr. Cassandra just mentioned, people are silly to think if they're not coming, this is not going to happen in the Black community. The Black young people are going to be arrested and put in detention centers for small, petty crimes on the streets. There is an agenda here of militarization of our cities and of our country. They are going to be arresting our young people and putting them in detention centers and turning them into a new mass army to do what they want them to do. We have to be smart enough to say, we are in this together. This is the time to join arms and join hands and fight together as an army. God can't blow his breath on the bones until the bones come together. We've got to get together with one another. The other thing I just want to mention that I think Dr. Cassandra brought up that is so important right now, that it must be a faith community, not a Christian, not a Muslim, not a Baha'i, not a Sikh, not a Jew. And all of our holy books of the Torah, the Quran, and the Bible, at the foundation is this human dilemma, this human respect, this care for life, the vulnerable, the disrespected, the disenfranchised. All of our holy books start at that. Let us come together on that as people of faith. All that petty garbage and then the denominationalism and all the rest, it's time to push that nonsense aside that's been keeping us. We're fighting over crumbs too. And we have no united voice, and that's why the Christian rights narrative is now the new voice of Christianity out there. How the hell did they become the voice of Christianity? We allowed them by our own silence, and while we're fighting over our rituals and our rules, they're out there united in their evil, hijacking Jesus and hijacking the Bible. We have got to come together in the civil rights movement. There were, as Dr. King pointed out, there were different lanes. There was Stokely, there was Malcolm, there was Elijah, there was Fred Hampton. There was all these different lanes, but they had the same goal. We can go in different lanes. And when Stokely Carmichael called Dr. King and Uncle Tom, the next day they asked him, well, Stokely Carmichael called you and Uncle Tom. What do you have to say about that? He says, he's my brother. We have to get to the point of saying we're brothers and sisters. We got to fight together for the vulnerable, or walk away from all of our pulpits in the synagogue and the mosque and the church.
One of the things that you lifted up when we talked last week, Father Pfleger, thought it was such a powerful image. You said that you shared with your people that when they go out and they're resisting and they're going together, and if I'm getting it wrong, I'm sure I'm getting it kind of wrong, but you'll correct me. When the people, if there's violence, if ICE people come, that they grab hold, join arms together and sit down together. I thought that was so powerful. I think
Yeah,
people are afraid of that type of powerful nonviolence.
yeah, they are, but that worked. We're going to do a remix of the civil rights movement. That we have, I mean, two incidents that's happened already. Where I said, wherever you see ICE, Border Patrol, or if National Guard come back in, which is very likely, go out of your doors, get your neighbors, talk about this ahead of time, plan it ahead of time. So you're not trying to organize on the spot. You got to be preemptive in organization, and then surround them, join arms, sit down, and continue to ask them their names, ask them their identification, continue to harass them with your mouth and with your voice. You don't have to move your hand, because in many instances, the city, as Marcus and Ciera know, ICE have left because of people who have come out in numbers, and they've gotten in their cars and drove off. They're cowards with guns.
They are. They're cowards.
Dr. Susie, one more thing, and Father Pfleger made me think about this. 90 million folk, right? And again, this is not merely about elections, friends. 90 million people, 90 million voters set the election out because we've been putting our trust in parties, right? And they were like, we're not doing that anymore. A part of this work is to also listen to your neighbors. There are folk that no party has talked to and no faith folk have talked to either. So they are sitting there in their own feelings, with their own fears, with their own frustrations. We have an opportunity to just really build beloved community by modeling what it looks like. And a part of this work really starts there, right? If we're really about the least, the left out, the ones the system lost, then it is really incumbent upon us to actually be that bridge and to reach out and bring folk in, right? So that they know that they have a place of spiritual and political belonging.
It's powerful. We have a question here. It says, what are the resources for those indirectly impacted by the offense is the best defense, terrorization, to overcome our fear and apathy, to gather strength and courage to act? Anybody? What are the resources for those who are indirectly impacted by this? Okay, let's think about that. That's a good question. I mean, I almost think that nobody is indirectly. I think we're all, I think that it's so pervasive that we're all impacted in some kind of way. Maybe the ICE people are not at your house, but they might be at your cousin's house. They might not, you might not be put out of your home with somebody. I mean, it's just too intertwined. And I think it's intentionally so. I think the goal is this disruption of the community. They want to get people of color out of this country. They want to create a society where people are imprisoned, and so they lose their rights. And so in this plantation economy, if you're in prison, you're going to be used to do the work to build the economy, which is what they want. This is a great country because it was built on the backs of people who were not paid. They did very hard work and were not paid. And there's all these billionaires want to get richer and richer and richer. If they have everybody that they think are not really human, if they have them in prison, then they can be used to help build the economy. Now, that's just me, but I think that because that's a possibility to impact all of our families, we are all impacted. We are all impacted.
If I could just add to that, so two things. One, yes, we are all impacted, but I do believe that one, we also have to ensure that Black people are building infrastructure in this moment as well, because there are a lot of resources that's going out in building, like I said, mutual aid resources, hotlines, response networks, and my grandmother and my mama actually would say that if you, I ain't gonna say it like they said, but if you get somebody an inch, they'll take a mile. And so I do think in this moment, this administration is trying to test the limits. And so this is why it's so important for us to show up to set that boundary and fight so that they don't take the mile. And for us to also understand how evil and white supremacy works. It does right now, the overt attack is on immigrants, but we see the yeah, the overt attacks are on immigrants. The covert attacks we see through policy and how they are weaponizing policy against Black people. But I think the other piece that we have to look at, because, for example, in Chicago, a lot of the migrants were placed in Black communities. They weren't really placed on the north side of Chicago. And so anytime there's an increased presence in law enforcement, that is never has never worked in the favor of Black people. So we've already seen it. We've seen people on the west side choked up by ICE. We've seen a young Black boy recently attacked and detained by ICE. So we're seeing, just by them being in proximity to our communities, how that the increased presence of them is impacting Black folks. And I would say the other piece is that we can be in solidarity with the Black and brown movement, as we should, because what everyone has said, we're absolutely right. We cannot be divided, but you cannot build solidarity if you don't have power. So it's, while we're simultaneously supporting and we're fighting, we also have to ensure that we're building power in Black communities so that we can fight back as well. So people should be thinking about, like, how are they building up their social justice ministries? How are they ensuring that they're preparing for the midterm elections? How are they politicizing their aunties, uncles, and cousins and preparing them to get out the vote? While we're building the rapid response teams, while we're making sure that our food pantries are open, we have to simultaneously ensure that we're building power so that it can be real Black and brown power, and not just Black folks showing up without power.
Yeah, and you're right. You're right. The coalition building and the community building is absolutely essential for this period of time. Reverend
And if
Martin?
I can say that, yeah, and I'd like Ciera to talk to rapid response groups, getting involved with groups who are responding to ICE, and not thinking that's just something for Hispanics, but if they're coming in our community, we need to come together in our community and build rapid response groups so that we can let each other know when ICE is in our community. Also with our churches, and I have a small church, well, small by membership, but we have a large building. We're opening up our church to the community. We're saying, if you're an organization that has training, you can use our space to train. We're bringing in block clubs to come together to talk about what's going on in the community. So, for you pastors out there, and one of the things that you can do, and churches in general, is open up your churches to these community groups to organize out of. Go back in time, let them organize out of your church. You may not have the members that to build power, but you have a building that you can build power out of.
That's one
Opening up your churches to the community is something that you can help out with.
That's one of the
If I could
blessings
just jump
of,
in and say one more thing. I'm sorry, I just want to say this other piece. We also have to ensure that we're taking the videos and we're posting them on social media. The main news media, they're not telling the story. And so we have to be the ones to tell that story. So if folks can't get out, at least they can get on social media and share all of these videos that are going around so that we can tell the story.
and is absolutely right. I forget what I was getting ready to say. Oh. When the pandemic came, church changed, right? The concept of church changed. Buildings were different because you couldn't go. Maybe that was a blessing. Sometimes and bad times we wonder, where are you at? Maybe God was right there. Maybe God saw exactly what was going on and wanted us as quote faith leaders to use those spaces to really do church, as opposed to being a place where people go to church. So I think that's an excellent thing, and people wonder how they can be involved. If you've got a building and you can use it and you have space, use it, give it to the people, let the people be have that as their headquarters, because we're going to need that. Jeanette Foreman said that we should be teaching everybody about the private prisons, which is a big deal. Private prisons being prepared to imprison masses of Black and brown people now being racially profiled, and how this was done before in the 80s. Does anybody want to talk about that? Somebody has, I mean, that is really a big thing I've heard. And I read that part of the attack for the building in Chicago had to do with, trying to protect the very wealthy person who owns it, but's not been taking care of it. And they've got all this relationship going. There's a lot of those types of shady relationships going on to build the wealth of people. And one of the things that they're counting on is more private prisons being built to build the wealth of white people. Anybody want to talk about that? And do you talk about that in your teachings with the people that you're training?
I will talk about it only because I have to leave. And I'm so sad because this has been such a good, vibrant conversation. And I'll say that private prisons, that is a real phenomenon. People are being incentivized to lock people up. Even when you look at, and I'm sure you've seen it on the news, like the job applications for people to get to work for ICE, they are incentivized to have their student loans paid off, to make X amount of dollars. We'll give you a $10,000 signing bonus over this 5-year commitment. Like there's all of these sort of bait and switch things that people are being incentivized to do. The same thing with people who work in the prison systems. They can't just open the prison systems. They need guards to work those jobs. And a lot of those jobs, you say, oh, everybody's got to eat. Everybody's got to work a job. No, there's some jobs you don't want. And like we have to be very careful, I think, about how there is a whole system orchestrated that I would even say, the school to prison pipeline, like our community schools are complicit in that. How we punish children at a young age, how we put them in detention, and then we put them on suspension, and then the next thing they're being funneled into this system, and they can calculate, some studies have said, as early as the 3rd grade where that child is going to go when they, or if they graduate high school. So this is not just something that's like, oh, we suspect, maybe we're guessing that we'll have to fill up these prisons. They know where they're getting these numbers from. And so it's intentional that there are no jobs in the community. It's intentional that there are no resources in the community. They want it set up to ghettoize, to trap people so that they get funneled into the system. And then, of course, many of you know, once you're incarcerated, you can't vote. You don't have any rights. The 13th Amendment has the exception of slavery for incarcerated people, for criminals. So there are all of these caveats that have been made to keep people oppressed. And we absolutely have to fight back, not just state prisons and federal prisons, but these for-profit prisons are a really toxic way of going through the neighborhood and using our bodies as capital. So thank you so much for allowing me to be here. This was just such a real treat, but it also just encouraged me because even I get demoralized, and this was very, very helpful.
Thank you.
It's not, Ms. Jackson, not only the privatizing of these prisons, which is going on. I mean, the gun industry has put millions and millions of dollars in price. So they can make money on both ends. But it's also, let's remember that Trump has put out across the country, he would give governors millions of dollars to build detention centers. So it's not just a private run, it's now going to be government run prisons, government run detention centers that he can control what happens. And watch when he gets these detention centers as they continue to go over these next years, you're going to have slave labor being done in detention centers by this government. They're going to control, and they're going to have them working for the government in slave labor.
That's what it is.
And there are two groups, right? Well, there are multiple ones, but two that we should really be paying attention to. Geo Group, they own the Delaney Hall that is in New Jersey. That's where they arrested even the mayor, right? Core Civic Group is another one of those, and they continue to build these like 1,000 plus bed centers. They have a financial incentive to actually fill those beds, right? And so we got to follow the money trail on those things, right? And both of those companies are publicly traded, so I named them for a reason. A part of this is our ability to also disrupt the economics resources that these vile actors are actually living off of. They are extracting our humanity so that they can build their own wealth, right? And the kind of power that Reverend Ciera is talking about, it is power that is not only realized at ballot box, but is power that's realized by the kind of disruption that comes in economic boycotts and etc. that we can organize to actually build as well. In New Jersey, they're also they are about to utilize a former military base, and so these are things that we have to look at. The regime master has said over and over again, asking other countries, what about the homegrowns? Well, who the hell are the homegrowns other than black folk who are filling up so many of these beds? So this slave labor could also be us being sold literally to other countries. So we have to think about everything is on the table. Everything is on the table. Senator Warnock reminds us that evil always goes too far. And the question is, as people of faith, how far are we going to be willing to go?
Right. You know, and it's also intricate. I think it's like a fine machine because they've been planning this kind of stuff, these actions for 50 years. And if you think about what's going on, 300,000 women have people, but many Black women, mostly Black women, have been fired, so they don't have jobs. More people, hundreds of thousands, will lose their jobs during the shutdown. Many of them are not going to be able to get a job. If you're poor, and you don't have, if you don't have any money, if you're going to lose your house and all this kind of stuff, some of you are going to resort to crime. I just think that it's all so intricately woven together. It's so thought out. It's so strategic. So that means that we have to be strategic in our response, which then goes back to, like we talked about, building communities. So, we have to say, I'll be damned, you're not going to take these people out of my community that lost their federal job. That's not going to happen. But if we say that, then we have to have an organized thing where we are taking care of our people. That's what has to happen. Because I promise you, people say, oh, that ain't going to happen to me. I've had people say that to me. I said, okay. And I don't say anything else, but I've had other people say to me, I didn't think he would do it to me. He don't care about anybody. He doesn't care. This is about money. This is about greed. It's about power. So then we have to define our power. And we do have power in community. One of the things, and I recommend this movie for everybody called Boycott. Is it called Boycott? About the Montgomery bus boycott. Because it shows resistance. It shows resistance, not only with the people who walked to work for all those 385 days, but all of the other people who got together and did the things for the other people in the community to make that thing work. It has to be a community effort. It has to be people doing what they do. So some people might, Dr. Cassandra, I can't do that. I can't go out I can't go out and do direct actions, and you don't have to do that. But if you bake a good, lasagna, you can bake your lasagna. You know what I'm saying? Take your lasagna over to the church and help people eat. If you have an organization or you have people in community that have a little bit of change, you can help buy diapers for those babies that might not have. We have to think about this in a broad way, because this is going to impact people in ways that we're not even thinking about. So I think that the resistance piece is broad. And I think as we're putting things together, we do have all the toolkits and all that, and there are things that we can do. We have to resist economically, we have to resist spiritually, we have to resist emotionally. I think we have to resist in all those ways, but there's a way and a place for every single person, every single church, every single organization to add to the power of what we need to do. Thoughts?
So as you were talking, these are two things that I'm actually thinking about. I haven't. One is, there's a quote that organized truth. Disorganized truth cannot defeat an organized lie. So just going back to the organization piece is so important for us because it's one thing to talk about getting organized, but then actually doing it on the ground, doing the work to put the egos to the side, doing the work to make sure I'm 7-day apostolic. So I believe we got to beat back our flesh and get in the spirit so we can stop acting crazy. So we got to do some fasting and praying around these issues, and then get off the altars and hit the streets. Those are some of the things that we got to do. But the other thing that I'm really wrestling with is that the movement is not the same as the civil rights movement.
Mm-mm.
And I'm not discounting a lot of the tactics, because the tactics work and the tactics got us to where we are. But I think the generation is different. It's a difference when you grow up in the struggle and you willing to throw down because you spent years and years of seeing your people lynched, years of seeing your land stolen, years of just experiencing the oppression. And our generation has been so far removed to where we do have this entitlement culture. And there are some of us, now I'm not knocking, because it's a lot. I'm from the millennial generation, and it's a lot of us on the front lines and a lot of us fighting, but our fight is different because we weren't cultivated in the same way. And so I think that we also have to be intentional about thinking about what works for this time and not using the same tactics because they worked back then and expecting them to work now. I don't have the answer for outside. We just keep on organizing and getting out there in the streets. Some more intention on building a movement that is able to combat the evil of this moment. And then the last thing that I'll say is that I do think that the MAGA movement has awakened a group of people who is not necessarily about, them being at one point. We probably could have engaged and had some of these conversations, which we still should have conversations that across aisles, and go more into Republican districts and try to have conversations to let them know that they're impacted too. But this othering piece of them feeling empowered, that they're better than, and that this spirit that's taken over, I do think that we also have to just be prepared for the fight of the spirit of white supremacy that the MAGA movement has awakened and is bold in this moment, and just the strategies to be able to attack that. So like the movement is different. Some of the tactics still work, but we have to be strategic on how we develop tactics for this time.
Absolutely. And I thank you for that, Reverend Ciera, because, in any movement that has produced change, it's been the young people that have led it. So the older people, give our little pieces of, experience and knowledge, but the younger people drive it. And so you're absolutely right. But I do think that the forming and the strengthening of community is something that has to happen regardless. I think because it's going to have to be the older with the younger and the Jews with the Christians, all of that, because all those lines, talking about fake news, fake boundaries that we have that have kept us apart, that has to be just forget about it. Whenever people have tried to cross those boundaries and cross those lines, the people in power have devised ways to break it up. So we have to be strategic and know that that's what they're going to try to do, and meet them where they try to come to us to do that sort of thing. But community is really going to be very, very, very important. We're going to give you a couple of seconds to do a closing statement, but I just want to remind people of how there are different ways of resisting. And in her book, Dr. Kellie Carter talks about this young man. This happened some years ago. It was, oh gosh, what was his name? His name was, it'll come to me in a minute. Come to me in a minute. I got the wrong thing up here. Okay, here we go. His name was Ty Anders, and he was a young boy. He was a teenager, like 13 years old. And she's talking about protection, how a form of resistance is protecting each other. And Ty Anders was a young boy. He was stopped by police officers because his taillights weren't on or something. And the police he kept driving to his house, drove to his grandmama's house. And he, because he was scared when he got to the house, the police cars surrounded him and they pulled their guns and they were telling him to get out of the car, and he was crying and saying he was afraid, and they didn't have any pity on him or anything. They just kept harassing him. And it was getting bad, and his sister and his relatives thought that he was going to be killed. And then all of a sudden, maybe not all of a sudden, they looked up, and his grandmother came out of the house, and she came out praying. She didn't have a gun. She came out praying, and she had her cane, and she kept walking and praying. And the police officers were turned their guns toward her. She kept walking and she kept praying. I'm talking about different types of resistance, walking and praying, and walking. Her grandson was on the ground. He was crying. He was screaming. He was afraid. She never said a word to him, like hush or anything like that. She just kept walking and praying. When she got close to him, the officers were trying to tell her to move out of the way. You're going to get in. She just kept walking and praying. When she got to him finally, she was 90 years old. When she got close enough to him and they were pointing the guns at her and at him, she threw her 90-year-old body over his body. And the police officers stepped back. I say that to say that the protection that we need to give each other is going to be vital. And you're not too young, you're not too old, you're not too anything. There are ways that we're going to have to think about protecting each other. This is a time for us to be strategic and to be empathetic and creative, but we're not in this by ourselves. And some of us are going to need each other to protect us when we do this work. So, well, we're almost at the end. I want to first tell all of you, thank you for being here. I'm going to give you all a chance to give a closing statement. First, Father Pfleger, then Dr. Gould, and then Reverend Ciera. Are you still with us, Reverend Ciera? And then Reverend Marcus. And you're muted, Father Pfleger.
Okay. 4 quick things. Number 1, don't get overwhelmed. Don't get consumed by this. Realize and activate the power that we have. Use that power. This is the time to recognize the power within us. Number 2, organize and strategize. We have to have a plan. We can't just go haphazardous. They have a plan. We better have a plan, and we better organize and strategize with one another. We've got to unite together. Race, creed, culture is the time to come together in unity and join forces of those who are the righteousness and justice need to unite together. We are larger than we think, and we are much more powerful than they are because we have moral authority in our side. And lastly, I think from, Jesus asked a man in Bethsaida, do you want to get well? And I think that's what God is really asking us right now, this country. Do we want to get well? Do we just want to get better, or do we want to get well? I don't want to just get better. I don't want to have a little less evil, a little less. I want to get well. And I think God is really asking, how long are we going to put up with this trouble? It is going into a real powerful outside reality right now, but this is nothing new. This is what's been going on. It's been the undercurrent of America since its origins, from genocide to slavery to Jim Crow to whatever. This is who America is. And it's time for us to say, let's rise up and put an agenda for America. Do we want to get well, or do we just want to get better? I want to get well.
Amen. Dr. Cassandra.
Father, following Father Pfleger on that is a lot. In this moment, I want to double down on what Ciera said. And it's not a slight, it's the reality of living in an era when people only heard about the fights.
Right.
They've not actually been taught to fight. So what are the boot camp conditions that we can create, all while holding people, because has not really been their reality? How might we impose political and economic costs? There has to be a cost that are imposed to these bad actors using our voices. Get off mute, whether it's through your online presence or the street corner or your pulpit. In our own locations, what is it? Who is the most vulnerable that we can defend? And what is it that we can disrupt? Because we cannot normalize what is happening. How will we defend the most vulnerable? What are the lessons from freedom fighters? And I want to remind all of us, prophets didn't whisper, they organized. We are the inheritors of Harriet's strategy, Ella's organizing tables, and Jesus' movement building. And we know that we have our work cut out for us. But if we abdicate this moment, we will have wasted our time and our energy, and the blood will be on our hands. Let's organize boldly and together. And let's turn this moment of fragmentation, fear, and frustration into our new moment and movement of freedom.
Amen. Thank you. Reverend Tab?
I'll read Reverend Ciera's statement out of the chat where she says, let's organize and politicize our people. We have to go on the blocks and lock arms with the people we've been conditioned to be afraid of. We are our greatest resource. Therefore, we must activate as many of the cousins as we can. I will follow that up to say, what everyone says, Father Mike, yes, the church needs to be the loudest voice. I echo that sentiments because we have the most spaces to be the loudest voice. We are in Chicago. There are spaces where there are, 4 or 5 churches in one block. Why couldn't we be the loudest voice in the community? And the second is as I said before, we have to open up our doors to the community. We can't shut the community out by being silent. If your church is not big enough to build power out of the church, then build power in the community by letting the church be a resource to the community. I have a very large church, but we don't have a parking lot. That means our church was built for the community. And so we must be a resource to the community. So that's what I say is invite the community in, find out where the trainings or who has those trainings, what organizations need a space, and invite them to use your space to organize so that we can come together as a community and not shut the community out of our churches. But let's do what we say at the end of service. Let's let the doors of the church be open.
Oh, amen. Let's do this. This has been a really good conversation. One of the questions is, will there be a follow-up plan after plan of action as a result of this meeting? What we do is we get with people that we've had as guests and we talk about what we can do together. And so you will hear from us. You will also receive a summary of this meeting that we'll send out to you along with some resources that you can look at. We again, we want to thank you for being here. If you didn't get your question out, just keep putting it in the chat because AI will get every single question that's in the chat and we'll try to answer them. And we also want to remind you that the Samuel DeWitt Proctor Conference will have its 2026 conference in Chicago in February. Hallelujah. It's going to be cold. But anyway, we want you to register now. Register now. You see the slide up there. We'll have good conversations and good trainings. Good trainings. We're going to do things a little bit differently. We're going to have the plenary sessions and we're going to break that into groups so people can understand what they can do. More than just come and sit and listen to nice lessons and good preaching. We want to give people things that they can put in their grip and take it on home so that they can do something and be a factor, a presence in all this work that we have to do. So register now. It's Monday, February 23rd through Thursday, February 26th. And it will be, I think this is probably one of the most important Proctor conferences that we've had because we're moving out of a place where we've had 50 years of relative freedom. I'm going to say it like that, to a place where they're trying to take us back to the 1800s. So please come and tell your friends and family to come and let's do this thing together. So again, I don't know if Reverend Damien is here, if you want to say anything, if anybody else from the staff wants to say anything. I want to thank Julie and Larita, and of course my partner, Reverend Marcus. I want to thank everybody for all the work that you do to make this happen. And as we end, I've asked the communications people to play a clip. It's only 27 seconds. I went out to one of the No Kings rally. They had them all in the neighborhoods here in Columbus, and I went out to one of the ones because I just wanted to see what was going on. And there was this young African American woman, and she was on fire. And she said some words that I think were very profound. So if we have that slide, if you could play it, and then after that, we can head on out and go to bed. Here she is.
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead. One day, my daughter and I came out here shopping and saw a couple of people with signs, and I felt like it was my calling. It's my time to shine. My mother and father were Black Panthers. They're political activists, and we know that we have to stand together in order to get through this. And so I'm here to fight back. You're doing it. What is your name? My name is Talia. Talia. Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
That's how we end it. It's good when you get to be so old to be
Man.
called yes, ma'am, but it's all right. It's good. So thank you all for
Right back.
thank you all for being here, and we will be in touch, and you will receive like a summary of this meeting. God bless. Have a really good night. And again, thanks a lot. Take care.
Thank you.